You're listening to Recovery Survey, the podcast that shatters stigmas around different types of addictions and takes a deep dive into spiritual principles.
24 hours later, I was arrested and was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. And that was when I rebuilt my life. You know, it was the gift of desperation. I never want to go back. You know, I stopped seeing life when I would fail as these indicators of self-worth. It was just life trying to teach me how to win, right? And so for me, sobriety has not been easy, but the commitment has been steadfast. It's been 14 years, over 14 years, 14 and almost a half years.
My guest today is Tony Hoffman. He is a professional BMX racer and a former Olympic coach. Welcome to the show, Tony. Man, I would love to just jump right in and have you tell your story.
Yeah, so I grew up in California, Central Valley, California, Fresno. I was a part of Clovis Unified School District, and the school district that I was a part of was pretty known for its sports programs. We've had back-to-back national baseball champions, nationally recognized football programs, basketball programs. The top wrestlers in the United States come from the city and Clovis Unified School District. And so, you know, being a young kid, I got involved in sports. I was very gifted in sports. Basketball was, you know, my first dream. I wanted to go to the NBA. And by the time I was in sixth grade, high school coaches were coming to watch me play, and middle school coaches were coming to watch me play. And when I got into middle school, I really started to struggle with mental health stuff that we didn't talk about in the 90s. I was born in 83. So I'm an 80s baby and went through middle school and high school and part of the 90s. And at this time, there was really no conversation around mental health. There was no conversation around anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts. We didn't have resources for these types of things the way we do now. And I would still say now we're still not quite where we need to be. My big thing was social anxiety. I was not able to really kind of fit in with people and make friends because I had this social anxiety that would create these fears around being around people in public spaces or being around large groups of people, or even just groups of people for that matter. And as a result of this social anxiety, I found myself isolating away from individuals. And the isolation really kind of gave birth to my depression. And the depression really kind of gave birth to the suicidal ideations where I felt like, you know, killing myself was a way to alleviate or get rid of the pain that I was experiencing within myself, because nothing I seemed to do was working at 12 years old. You know, I was vocalizing this pain to my parents. They didn't know what to do. My parents are boomers in every description of what we would think a boomer is. And that's not to say that there's anything wrong with boomers. They just come from a generation that is typically emotionally ignorant. They are unaware of their emotions. They're unaware of social emotional well-being. They tend to be hard workers, focused on retirements and providing, which I think are great things that even generations like Gen Z could really benefit from in terms of dropping entitlement and focusing on working hard and earning your position in life. But my parents were workaholics, and I was an individual that emotionally needed their support, and I wasn't getting that. And so what I did was I started to make all of these connections and stories that I would create starting when I was 12 years old. You know, I wasn't good enough. My dad doesn't love me. My dad's my hero. I want my dad at all my basketball games, but he's not showing up. And so I'm telling myself, you know, I'm not good enough. My dad doesn't love me. Other people are good enough, and other families love their kids because they're showing up to these games. And really what it did was give birth to a lot of resentment that I didn't know was building at that time. It's really hard to recognize that you're building resentments towards other people when you're completely unaware of self, when you're unaware of the emotions that you're experiencing, what you're feeling in that moment. And so I was building this resentment towards my father, towards my parents, towards their work, and really the emotional neglect that was at no fault, or like it wasn't intentional by my parents, is really the catalyst to becoming this person who was completely defiant. I just stopped caring when I was 12 years old. It appeared that my dad didn't care. It appeared that my parents were more focused on work. And so if they didn't care, then why did I care? There was no reason to care. And I didn't fit in with people at school. And because I didn't fit in with people at school, or felt like I didn't fit in with people at school as a result of this social anxiety, or I really spent a lot of time to myself. And the problem is that I was so good at sports that there was always this attention that came with my gift, and this attention that I didn't really want. And it really started to make me resent myself because I didn't know how to manage the attention. I didn't really want the attention. And I felt so disconnected from everybody else. It just felt like I didn't have a gift. It felt like I had a curse. And, like I said, killing myself seemed to be something that I thought about often from 12 to, my mid-20s. I was kicked out of school in 7th grade, and I got a girl some weed. It was one of the decisions I made to try and get some kind of social validation within the institution of school that I was in. And I was removed from 7th grade, which is how I found the BMX bike. I found the BMX bike because my brother was racing BMX at this time. And I was, just like I said, I was such a naturally gifted athlete. By the time I got on my bike at 18 years old, I was on the cover of the largest BMX racing magazine in the world. I was ranked number 1 in the points going into the final race. I was sponsored by Fox Racing, Airwalk shoes, 5 sunglasses. I had, all of the setup stuff to be successful in racing BMX if I wanted to go off and become a professional shortly after that time of being a senior in high school. But I still struggled with my mental health. Being on the cover of a magazine didn't fix things. Having sponsorships didn't fix things. Friends didn't fix things. I really just struggled internally with myself. And that was really when I got involved in trying mind-altering substances. I explained to people that, human emotions are a lot like soda bottles. When you shake a soda bottle, emotional pressure builds up. When we have events occur in our life that cause some kind of arousal of emotions, we experience a similar pressure. The more pressure that builds from shaking the bottle or experiencing things in our lives, the more pressure we experience, and then the more willing we become to find things that change the way we feel to alleviate the pressure that we're experiencing. And if you're not using healthy coping mechanisms to do so, you will find things that change the way you feel in terms of mind-altering substances. Now, I would say that most people are doing this in many different ways. Television, coffee, gambling. There's all types of different things that you can do. Exercise, there's healthy things and there's unhealthy things. And we develop these coping mechanisms, or we do these things to release the emotional pressure that we experience. Some people that are not like myself can enjoy a glass of wine. And what do they say? I'm having a glass of wine so I can unwind from the day. Unwinding is just releasing the emotional pressure from the day. For myself, at this time when I was 18 years old, I had a misconception about addiction and what it was. I thought that it was individuals that lacked willpower, that just couldn't control themselves. I thought that it was people that came from the other side of town, that these individuals just were raised in bad places, or their mother and father weren't involved in their lives. Just, all kinds of stigma-related ideas that were faulty. My dad was an alcoholic, but a binge drinker. His mom was a drug addict, alcoholic, pill-popping alcoholic, and her dad was an alcoholic. And so I had addiction that kind of ran in my family. And so when I was 18 and I started experimenting with mind-altering substances, at that time, marijuana was the first thing that people used, drinking and marijuana. Nowadays, it's a little bit different. Usually it's like vaping, and pills are equally as mixed into the group as much as marijuana is, right? And so I had this impression that I would just smoke weed, and I would do it occasionally because I was offered a job to go down and be a network administrator. I didn't want to race BMX professionally. It wasn't something I saw myself doing. And so I was pursuing a network administration career for computer networks, and was offered a nice job in San Diego before I graduated high school. And so I'm smoking weed and telling myself, I've got all these responsibilities that I need to take care of. I'm not going to become a pothead like all my friends are. They're smoking every day, ditching school. Like, that's just not for me. In fact, weed didn't help my anxiety. It didn't help my depression. It really didn't help my suicidal thoughts. Like, if anything, it made it worse. I just became more paranoid. I had more anxiety. I wasn't getting any kind of relief internally, but it was kind of helping me break down some of my social anxieties. It made me feel like I had something in common with these individuals that I was smoking with. And so before I knew it, I was smoking every day. I went down to San Diego. The job didn't work out. And I'm blaming myself the entire time that, life is just not falling into place. It's my fault. It's my fault. And if it's not my fault, it's also, let me back up. It's my fault in a shaming way. It's because I'm not good enough. It's not my fault because I'm holding myself accountable and I'm going to make changes so that I get different results in the future. It's my fault because I'm not good enough. And I carry this victim mentality of life, right? Like, life is out to get me. My coaches are out to get me. My teachers are out to get me. Society is out to get me, just anything and everything in terms of victim mentality. And so I quit. I came home. When I came home, San Diego's 6 hours south of Fresno County, where I'm from. I just started going to parties again, and I got introduced to Oxycontin. When I got introduced to Oxycontin, it was a miracle, to put it. It's just it. It was a miracle, because for the first time in my life, I felt something release all of the pressure that I was feeling and building since I was 12 years old. I'm now 18 years old. So I had 6 years of pressure. I couldn't find anything that would release the pressure in a way that gave me some kind of relief. Racing my bicycle absolutely was doing that to a certain degree. But I didn't recognize it at that time because I didn't have the two forms of emotional release that I think that human beings need to feel secure in their mental health. And one is an activity, and two is a safe place to have a conversation. I had an activity. I didn't have a safe place to have a conversation. So my bicycle was helping. But when I put my bike away, I had a buildup of emotional pressure that Oxycontin seemed to fix. It took away my anxiety. It took away my depression, my suicidal thoughts. And when I started using it, I thought to myself, well, I would never become a drug addict. This is not heroin. This is not crack cocaine. This is not cocaine, meth, or LSD, or some of these other things that the DARE program told us to stay away from. So in my mind, I was justified in using Oxycontin because it came from a doctor, and it was the first time I'd ever felt normal, or so I thought. And within 3 years, I committed a home invasion robbery for prescription pills that were inside a house. Biggest mistake I've made in my life. And I became so willing to do it because I was experiencing heroin withdrawals, basically, from these prescription painkillers. And anybody that's listening right now knows that when you go through these withdrawals, you'll do whatever it takes. You know what I'm saying? I've seen straight people turn into homosexuals. I've seen honest, good people rob and steal and scheme. There's just so many different things that people will do to fix the feeling of withdrawal symptoms. And that was me. I became willing to arm myself with a weapon and go inside a house and rob an individual at gunpoint. Fortunately, I was not arrested immediately. And when I was arrested, that I was given a shot. My parents hadn't seen me in several years. They kicked me out of the house, and I asked for help, and they offered me help, and they got me an attorney, a really good attorney that kept me out of prison. And being a white kid from the good side of town with a good attorney in court really helps. And so it kept me out of prison, but I had all these things that I needed to do, felony probation, and I couldn't come back. If I came back, I was going to go to prison for a long time. I had this conception in my mind that now that I had prison time over my head, I'd be okay. I'm not going to go to prison. I don't want to use again because I don't want to go to prison, but that's just not the way it works. You have to recognize that there's a problem. And in that problem, recognizing that there's a problem, you have to seek out a solution. The solution doesn't find you. You seek out the solution. I think the solution can find you in terms of people saying, hey, you should come to a meeting. Hey, you should come to church. Hey, you should come to this fellowship group, or you should come to this skate park where we have smart meetings. And It's a bunch of dudes and girls that are sober and just trying to, be the better people than they were before and stay away from the stuff that was killing us. But I didn't recognize I had a problem. I was still a young kid. I was still 21 years old. You don't hear many stories of 21-year-olds getting sober. You don't hear too many stories of 18-year-olds getting sober. There's just so much that has to happen before we reach a moment where the gift of desperation is upon us. And I didn't reach that for another 2 years. I relapsed right when I got out of treatment, and my parents kicked me back out of the house. And for the next 2 years, I was just on a downward spiral until I became homeless. And, I hear people talk about being homeless all the time, man. And I'm not really into comparing stories, even though that's what I'm going to do. My homeless wasn't sleeping on people's couches. You know what I'm saying? I was fucking pushing shopping carts, sleeping behind dumpsters. People would throw stuff at me or make fun of me outside of liquor stores. Like, I was in bad shape. And, my friends would leave me and drive to another side of town with them. And then they would just leave me over there, and I would spend the rest of the night walking around town by myself, high on meth, been up for 6, 7, 8 days, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 days at a time, talking to myself and just in an utter state of despair and hopelessness and shame and guilt, just all that stuff that many of us have felt. And you don't have to be homeless to feel that. It's such an interesting thing. Some people feel that as soon as they lose their job, or their wife kicks them out, and they feel exactly what I felt when I was pushing a shopping cart, or, kids would throw stuff at me. I was walking down the street and they were driving by in a bus, middle school kids throwing shit at me while I'm walking down the street. It's like, they feel that when their wife leaves them. They feel that when they lose their job. And I didn't think there was coming back from that. That's, at that point, I this is going to be the rest of my life. I've tried to change. I've tried treatment. Jail didn't work. My family's given up on me. Friends have given up on me. I'm just destined to put these needles in my arm. And eventually one of these times, I'll be lucky when it kills me. Right? It'll end the misery that I'm living in. That's just not the way my story's played out. It wasn't, I didn't stay on the street for much longer. I was on the street for 6 months, and I had a spiritual awakening. It was a sudden epiphany. And in that epiphany, I believe I was shown what mercy and grace look like. I was shown that I'm not in control like I thought, and that something greater was out there. And that something greater loved who I was, despite all of my shortcomings, despite all of my failures, despite how much I believed that the world was against me. There was this one thing that wasn't against me. And 24 hours later, I was arrested and sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. And that was when I rebuilt my life. It was the gift of desperation. I never want to go back. I'm always perplexed when I go to a meeting and I hear an individual say how fun it was. It was never fun for me. It was a relief in the beginning, but I would never call what I went through fun. Staying up till 5 o'clock in the morning, snorting cocaine because you can't fucking come down and you don't want to come down. So you're just snorting line after line after line after line after line till it's 5 o'clock in the morning. And then you see the sun come up. And then when you switch to meth, you can watch the sun come up and go down 15 times before you go to sleep. Like, there was nothing fun about that. There was nothing fun about being around individuals that give you a place to stay when you're at your worst, and take your wallet in the middle of your sleep and steal your last $20 so they could go fucking buy cigarettes and some hot Cheetos. You know what I'm saying? There was nothing fun about that to me. And so the desperation that I felt was, I'm never going back to that. I'm never going to surround myself with individuals that harm other people, that have ill will towards other people. I'm not going to squander the gifts that I was given. I'm going to be grateful for every opportunity that I have. And I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm going to learn from those mistakes. I stopped seeing life when I would fail as these indicators of self-worth. It was just life trying to teach me how to win, right? And so for me, sobriety has not been easy, but the commitment has been steadfast. It's been 14 years, over 14 years, 14 and almost and a half years, because I don't ever want to go back. There's nothing fun about it. When I go through an emotional experience and my brain recalls using dope, it's quickly followed up by torment, a vision of torment, pushing a shopping cart, watching my friends get in cars and leave me in the middle of nowhere so I could walk around the rest of the night by myself. It's just not the answer, because anxiety has never lasted forever. Depression has never lasted forever. Even maybe subtle thoughts of removing myself have not lasted forever in recovery. But it's also brought individuals in my life that truly care. I have a small list of people that truly care. And that list is dynamic, right? Individuals can come and go from our lives. And I don't take that personal these days. If an individual shows that they can no longer be trusted, I have no problem getting rid of them. It's just not worth having individuals that I can't trust in my life. It's not worth having individuals that don't care for me in my life. It's not worth it for me to have individuals that don't support me, that can't be there for me in a similar fashion that I am there for them. And that doesn't mean they need to call me every day. It just means they need to be there if I need them. And recovery has given me that. That's one of the greatest gifts that recovery has given me, is a small group of people that truly care about me. My relationship with my family has been rebuilt. My career life has been extremely successful as a mental health and addiction speaker, as a coach for BMX. I was able to be a part of the Olympics in 2016 as a BMX coach, became one of the biggest speakers in the mental health and addiction space, started a nonprofit organization for kids in 2012, and was very successful for several years before we finally stepped away from that work. We raised in over $100,000 a year, giving away $40,000 worth of bicycles, $10,000 worth of skateboards. Recovery has given that to me. And everything that recovery has given me, it's typically been to give to somebody else. And so today I try to live my life as grateful as I can, no matter what. Shit happens, life happens sometimes, comes in waves, but I've always had I'm not going to pick up attitude. That's just not an option, And so, I come across opportunities like this, where you invite me onto your podcast to share my story. And I'm always grateful for these types of things. And I've just never been too good for them. If I got time for it, I'll do it. So with that, thank you for allowing me to share my story on here. I hope somebody found something that was of benefit to them. I know 30 minutes isn't usually a long time for me to speak, so there's not a lot of details, but you can find more about my story on my podcast, One Choice. It's on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcast app. I have a website, Tony Hoffman Speaking. You can find me on Instagram, Tony M. Hoffman. On Facebook, Tony Hoffman Speaking. And if you have questions, you can reach out to me. If you need a little help, you can reach out to me. This is my life work, and I make myself available. So with that said, thank you, Brett, for having me on the show. And thank you guys for listening.
Tony, thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing your story with us. I also wanted to give you a warm Texas welcome and say we're glad to have you in the Lone Star State.
You've been listening to Recovery Survey. If you got anything out of today's episode, I'd ask you to please leave us a 5-star review and share this episode with a friend. If you'd like to get in contact with us, you can find us at recoverysurvey.com. You can listen to all of our episodes on the website, as well as connect with us on social media, where you can get previews for upcoming episodes.